Whether you're a bioprocess engineer hunting for the perfect scaled-down model, a biotech founder architecting the leap to commercialization, or a scientific analyst who craves raw technical truth, you've reached the technical edge. In this space, we live by a single mantra: the process is the product. Welcome to the Biomanufacturing and Fermentation Technology podcast with Prasad Ernala. Hit subscribe and ring the bell to join a global community and stay at the vanguard of biotech translation. Let's build the bioindustrial future together.
I want you to picture a scenario for a moment. It's actually a pretty common nightmare we found digging through the research stack for today. You're a scientist, you're brilliant, you're driven, you spent, 10 years in a basement lab, barely seeing the sun, just sweating over microscopes, and finally, you've done it.
The eureka moment.
Exactly. You've invented a biomaterial that replaces single-use plastic, or maybe a new life-saving antibiotic that bacteria can't resist. You've proved it works in the test tube. The science is totally sound.
You're getting the Nobel Prize buzz. Your family's proud.
The hard part is over.
Right? You would certainly think so.
But then you try to turn that science into a business, and you go bankrupt. Not because the product didn't work, not even because you were a bad CEO, but simply because you couldn't survive the transition from the lab bench to the factory floor.
It is a tragedy, and honestly, reading through this research, it's a tragedy that's happening on an almost industrial scale.
Right.
It's what insiders call the biotech valley of death.
And usually when we hear about these companies folding, the narrative is pretty harsh. We say, oh, the market just wasn't ready, or
they burned their cash too fast.
the management team didn't know what they were doing.
Right.
We blame the player.
Right. It's always easier to blame the specific team on the field. But looking at the specific reviews on systemic market failure we have here, there's a massive twist.
Okay.
The evidence suggests that for many of these companies, it is not a failure of science, and it's not strictly a failure of management. It is a failure of system design.
Which implies the game is rigged.
It implies the game is being played with the wrong rule book. We're trying to force, square pegs into round holes. We're treating heavy industrial biology like it's a snappy software startup, and the math just doesn't work.
Okay, that's our mission for this deep dive then. We are going to unpack why late-stage biotech scale-up is crashing and how to fix it. Because if we are losing game-changing technology just because our financial plumbing is broken, that affects everyone.
Precisely. We need to explore why this stage of development shouldn't be treated as a typical venture capital gamble, but more like strategic infrastructure.
So we're going to look at the structural gaps in capital.
We are, and the desperate need for what's called open access factories. And this is a big one. We are measuring success completely wrong.
So let's start with the mechanics of the failure.
Yeah.
Why does this valley of death exist? I mean, venture capital, VC, they love risk, don't they? They fund crazy ideas all the time. Why does the model break down here?
To understand that, you have to look at the physics of the scale-up valley of death. In the life cycle of a biotech company, there's a very specific pivot point.
Okay.
You've done the lab work, you've got the beaker with the glowing liquid, now you have to enter the pilot and demonstration phases.
This is where you prove you can make this stuff in big tanks, thousands of liters, not just a few milliliters.
Correct. And this is where the trouble starts. At this exact moment, your investment requirements surge. You need tens of millions to run these pilots, but your scalability risk also surges.
So you're asking for the most money at the exact moment you have the highest chance of failing.
Which is absolute kryptonite for investors. But here's the nuance the sources highlight. Late-stage bioprocess development isn't like writing code. It requires assets that look like heavy infrastructure.
We're talking fermentation plants, downstream processing suites.
Massive utilities, rigorous quality systems, the works.
Downstream processing, that's basically just separating the product from the soup, right?
Exactly. It's filtration, purification, drying. It's incredibly energy-intensive hardware. These assets have what economists call high fixed capital requirements. They are expensive to build.
And long amortization horizons. Takes years to pay them off.
Decades sometimes, unlike a laptop for a coder, which you pay off in a week of good work.
Right.
And crucially, this equipment is utilization sensitive.
Break that down. That sounds like jargon for really expensive.
It means if you aren't running that factory constantly 24/7, 365, you are hemorrhaging money. Think of it like a commercial airliner. An airplane only makes money when it's in the air, moving people. If it's sitting on the tarmac, it's costing the airline a fortune in maintenance, parking fees, insurance.
Got it. So if you have a software startup and you pause coding for a month to rethink your strategy, you lose time. Maybe you burn a little rent money.
But you don't go broke. If you have a fermentation plant and it sits idle for a month because you're tweaking a recipe, you lose a fortune in overhead.
Yeah.
You just can't turn these biological systems off and on like a light switch.
And this is where the VC mismatch comes in, right? Because venture capital is designed for what? Speed.
Speed and the rapid repricing of risk. The VC model is built to fund uncertainty and optionality, looking for that 10x return in a relatively short window, usually 5 to 7 years.
It's just structurally misaligned with the slow, disciplined learning required for heavy engineering.
Exactly. If I'm a VC, I want to see you grow fast and exit fast, get acquired or go public. I don't want to pay for you to tinker with a giant steel tank for 5 years while you figure out your impurity profiles.
And that's the aha moment in the research. When we treat this infrastructure phase purely as venture risk, we are externalizing costs.
And the sources note this leads to the erosion of domestic manufacturing capabilities. We lose the specialized technical labor, the people who actually know how to run these tanks, and we lose the ability to make things at home.
So by forcing these companies to play by VC rules, grow big or die fast, we're actually hollowing out our own industrial base. We're burning the furniture to heat the house.
We're optimizing for financial exits rather than industrial durability. And that brings us to the first major solution discussed in the policy papers. We have to stop thinking about this as software.
Okay, so that's the diagnosis. The hardware is too heavy for the software money. Let's talk about the cure. The courses mention a very specific market failure called redundant Capex.
This is one of the most frustrating inefficiencies in the current system. Capex stands for capital expenditure money spent on physical stuff. Right now, almost every single biotech startup that gets to this phase tries to build its own proprietary pilot plant.
They all want their own clubhouse.
Basically. But imagine if every trucking company tried to build its own private highway system just to move their goods.
That would be insane. You'd go broke paving the first mile.
Exactly. Yet that is what we expect biotech startups to do. It leads to fragile finances because they burn all their cash on concrete and steel before they've even sold a product.
And it leads to underutilization.
Huge underutilization because one startup rarely has enough volume to keep a pilot plant running at that airline capacity we talked about.
So the plant sits empty half the time, wasting money, while the startup across the street is building another plant that will also sit empty.
It's wildly inefficient. It's a duplication of capital that provides zero extra value to the economy.
So what's the fix? Is it just play nice and share?
The fix, according to the policy review, and there's a lot of discussion about this in Europe right now, is open access demo facilities.
Shared highways.
Shared highways. The idea is to build modular pilot and demonstration facilities that are embedded in the ecosystem. Instead of building a plant, you rent one. You bring your organism, your process, and you just plug it into their infrastructure.
That sounds obvious, but walk me through the benefits. Why is this better than owning your own gear? I mean, investors usually like assets, don't they?
Not these assets, not at this stage. Shared facilities reduce 3 types of uncertainty at the same time. First, technical uncertainty.
Okay.
These facilities let you run your process under industrially relevant constraints without having to build the constraints yourself. You find out if your biology survives these steel tanks before you buy the steel.
Which is a much cheaper lesson.
Precisely. Second, financial uncertainty. You convert a huge fixed cost building the plant into a variable cost paying for access time.
So your balance sheet looks a lot better to investors.
Significantly better. You aren't carrying that massive debt or depreciation. You're agile. You're not weighed down by the anchor of a factory you can't afford.
And the third type of uncertainty.
This one is subtle, but huge. Investor uncertainty. When you use a standardized, high-quality facility, it produces higher quality, comparable data sets.
It's like the difference between saying, I ran this experiment in my garage, and I ran this at a certified national lab.
Exactly. Investors trust the data more because the conditions are controlled. But, and there's a big but here, the expert in our source material warns that this isn't as simple as just renting out space. Governance is key.
Governance? You mean rules?
I mean strict operational discipline. You can't just open the doors and say, have at it. These neutral facilities must have standardized documentation, strict quality systems, operating discipline.
Because if they don't.
If they don't, the source warns that shared access becomes shared variability.
Shared variability. That sounds like a polite way of saying contamination or just sloppy work.
It means if the tank is dirty from the last guy, or if the sensors aren't calibrated the same way, or the documentation is a mess, your data is garbage.
And if the data is garbage, you haven't de-risked anything. You've just wasted rent money instead of construction money.
Right, so these facilities need to be run with military precision, industrial grade. The goal is to isolate the variable of does the biology work? So you aren't questioning, did the tank work?
Okay, so step one,
Yeah.
stop everyone from building their own private factories. That saves money. But there's still the issue of funding the actual operations. You said earlier VC isn't the right fit.
Right.
And grants are usually for, like, early-stage science, right?
Yeah.
Here's money to discover a molecule.
Correct. This is what economists call the missing middle.
The funding gap.
Traditional grants fund early research proving the concept. Equity funds commercial growth, sales, and marketing. This pilot to demo phase just falls right into a void.
Too applied for the research grants, but too risky for the growth equity funds.
Exactly. So what kind of money should be filling this hole? If the banks won't touch it and the VCs are bored, who pays?
This is where the new instruments come in.
This is where the sources propose some really specific instruments. And the goal here is important. We need funding that doesn't force a premature exit. We need patient capital.
Give me an example of what that looks like in the real world.
One proposal is milestone-based scale-up grants. This is money tied specifically to demonstrated robustness.
Robustness, not novelty.
Right. You don't get the cash for discovering something new. That's for the academic labs. You get the cash for proving you can make the same thing 10 times in a row without it failing.
That's a huge shift. Usually, the headlines and the grants are all about innovation, new. You're saying we should fund boring, consistent, reliable.
That is exactly what scale-up requires. You stop funding the what and start funding the how. It's about operational excellence, not just scientific genius.
I like that. What else?
Another tool is repayable advances.
How does that work?
Imagine a loan that acts like a grant if you fail. If the technology crashes and burns, the debt is forgiven. It was a research expense. But if you succeed commercially, you pay it back into the fund to help the next company.
That's clever. It recycles the capital. It's a revolving door of funding.
It is. And then there's revenue or royalty participation. This lets the public sector, if they're providing the funding, to keep some upside potential without taking equity and diluting the founders too early.
So the taxpayer gets a slice of the pie if it works out, but they don't own the company. It aligns incentives.
Perfectly. The public takes the early risk, and they share in the eventual reward.
This brings up a question about standards, though. If I'm giving out this money, what's the trigger? What's the test I have to pass? You mentioned robustness.
This is the technical gate. In this phase, success is not about peak performance. It's not about hitting a home run one time.
It's about your batting average.
It's about reliability. The sources are very clear on this. We need to fund the consistency of yields, the impurity profiles, and the stability of process control. If you can show your process is boringly predictable, that is when you unlock the next level of funding.
Making boring profitable. I love that. But let's zoom out a bit. We've talked about the mechanics, the plants, and the money. But there's a bigger philosophical shift here about how we judge success in this whole industry.
This is where it gets really fascinating. Currently, the primary metric for success is firm-level survival. Did the startup survive? Or, did they get acquired for $1 billion?
Which seems fair. If the company dies, it failed. End of story.
But did it? The source argues for a capability framework. We need to expand our definition of public ROI, return on investment.
What does that look like? If the company goes bust, where's the return?
Well, imagine a startup uses one of those shared facilities we talked about. They train 20 engineers in advanced fermentation. They develop a new purification process. But then the market shifts, they run out of cash, and the company folds.
Okay, from a VC perspective, that's a zero, a total write-off.
But from a system perspective, if those 20 engineers stay in the region and move to other companies, you've retained workforce outcomes.
Ah, I see.
If the physical infrastructure they used is still there for the next startup, you've retained capacity outcomes.
And if the knowledge of how to run that process stays within the country,
you have sovereignty outcomes. The individual company might be the casualty, but the army still gets stronger.
the system can succeed even if the single company fails.
Exactly. And this is crucial for what policymakers call technology sovereignty. Think about supply chain shocks, pandemics, geopolitical crises. If we want to be able to make our own medicines and materials in a crisis, We need that ecosystem of skills and steel, regardless of whose logo is on the door.
That requires a totally different way of thinking about governance, though. You can't just be looking at a balance sheet. You almost need to be looking at a census or something.
You need to look at the ecosystem health. The source discusses nonlinear pathways. Governance models need to stop assuming a binary outcome. Either you scale independently and become a unicorn, or you fail.
Because sometimes the best path isn't to go it alone.
Often it isn't. Commercialization isn't a straight line. Maybe the best path is early licensing. Maybe it's partnering with a big manufacturer.
But the VCs want the unicorn. They want the IPO. They want the bell ringing on Wall Street.
Right, so we need policy that encourages these parallel pathways. The expert insight here suggests specific actionable policies, like requiring data rooms and IP clarity as a condition of funding.
Explain that. Data room sounds like corporate speak. What does it actually mean here?
It means keeping your house in order. It's digital hygiene. It forces a startup to organize their intellectual property and data as if they were about to be sold from day one.
Why does that matter?
Because if a startup is failing or needs to pivot or needs to be acquired, all the data, the know-how, the recipes, the safety protocols should be packaged and ready to transfer.
So if the ship sinks, we can at least salvage the cargo.
Exactly. We need to ensure that if a transition happens, even a distressed one, the value and knowledge are preserved rather than lost in a bankruptcy fire sale. It's about resilience.
We're moving from a winner-takes-all casino mentality to a resilient infrastructure mentality.
That's it.
It really is a complete reframe. We started this deep dive talking about a paradox why scientific success leads to business failure. And what I'm hearing is that we've been trying to build skyscrapers using a toolkit designed for building apps.
That is the perfect analogy. We have been blaming the science for not fitting the business model instead of changing the business model to fit the science.
So to synthesize what we've learned today, we need to stop looking at the Valley of Death as just a place where bad ideas go to die. It's a structural gap.
Correct. And to fix it, we treat scale-up as infrastructure. We stop building redundant private pilot plants and start building shared open-access fidelities.
We change the money. We move away from pure equity and towards milestone-based grants and repayable advances that fund robustness, not just hype.
And finally, we redefine success. We look at the public ROI, the retention of skills, capacity, and sovereignty, rather than just checking if a specific LLC is still solvent.
It makes the boring stuff, the factories, the grants, the governance, seem actually pretty exciting. It's the difference between having a few lucky winners and having a winning industry.
And that leads me to the final thought I want to leave with you, the listener. We often talk about the Valley of Death, like it's a law of physics, like gravity. Oh, it's just hard to scale up. It is what it is.
But it's not gravity.
It's not. It is a choice. It is a choice of system design. We have chosen a financial system that prioritizes liquidity and speed. We could choose a system that prioritizes durability and capability.
Right.
If we shift our mindset to view bioprocess development as a shared industrial responsibility, we don't just save a few startups, we secure the future of our manufacturing capability. The valley isn't inevitable, we just haven't built the bridge yet.
That is a powerful place to leave it. The bridge is ours to build. Thank you for helping us unpack the infrastructure behind the headlines.
My pleasure.
And to you, listening, next time you read about a breakthrough biotech innovation, ask yourself, who's going to build the tanks? Thanks for joining us on the Deep Dive. Catch you next time.
Hi there, thank you for staying with me until the very end. If these technical insights help bridge the gap in your own process, please hit subscribe and make sure to hit the notification bell. Stay connected for our next deep dive into the realities of biomanufacturing. I am Prasad Ernala. Thanks for listening.